Hey, welcome to day 25. My name is Tammy Davis. I am your mentor and guide for these 30 days of essential oils. Thank you so much for joining me. Whether this is your first time here or you've been with me this whole time, this is just very, very exciting. As you may already know, I really dig it, and I'm happy to be sharing this with you. For those of you who are new to me, I come to you with over 30 years at this point of experience between pharmacology and aromatherapy. I am internationally certified, and I have extensive background with the epigenome, study of plant constituents and their effect on human health, as well as drug development. And that does play into the epigenome, majorly plays into that. Anyway, what you hear here is, as I've mentioned before, not something you're going to find anywhere else, because I talk about oils in a way that I've used them and understand them chemically to work with the system. So this is not something that you may find on another website or in a book. Today's essential oil is Chang. I have a friend I can only see this friend in the camera. I cannot see. Anyway, so Chang is an interesting one. It's not a common one. It smells very much like lemongrass, although it's nothing like lemongrass, except for the fact that it actually has citral in it. Got it. It has citral in it, and otherwise known as geraniol, spelled, yeah, that's mosquito, Geranial. It also actually has geraniol in it, Geraniol. So it has both of them in it. While we're aware of which each of these constituents can do in the system, it's ultimately the synergistic effect of this combination and how it and your particular wiring and how it affects you. But there are ways to at least begin working with it. So like I said, geraniol, that ends in al, is the same thing as citral, and citral is extraordinarily sedating. So you want to be careful with that when it comes to any kind of central nervous CNS depressants. You also don't want to mix this with any antidepressants and or diabetic medications. Essentially, he's back. Sorry, I don't want to. I really don't want to. Can't believe I just did that on camera. It did fly away. Anyway, I have used Chang a lot with respiratory issues, specifically more along the lines of coughing, where chronic coughs, where there's no particular health issue per se, but there's a lot of spasmodic type of coughing and what seems to be some kind of congestion. In my mind, because like I said, there's no diagnosis, it typically accompanies anxiety and allergies, which is no mistaking why that would go on, why the two would be basically considered the same, because the more congestion there is present, the higher the level of histamine. That the body's producing histamine. And this is really the crux of allergies. Now, the interesting thing is the individual may not necessarily be directly an allergy to anything externally. It could be just really poor digestion as a result of chronic stress will increase histamine levels. And it takes a lot to help somebody. I mean, they have to take responsibility, truthfully. The Chang will help relieve some of the symptoms. Well, basically, okay, so let me just back up a minute and just say, the way oils work is they are signaling molecules. Okay, so they have the ability to influence and modify genetic expression. That said, there's no such thing as the be-all, end-all. I know we would like to have something be the answer, and while oils are, kind of close to being that, they are not They aren't. They are not it, because they are just signaling molecules, which means the body requires the synergistic relationship with our environment. It needs the macronutrients, it needs micronutrients, and this doesn't mean to be megadosing on supplements. This means to actually help your body in the process of digestion. One way to do that is to, I'm thinking here about how the direction I want to go with this. So what happens when we don't digest food, or what happens when we're chronically stressed, is the digestion slows down. And like I said, while the oils, we would like for them to be the answer, they're not. They're simply molecules that have the ability to influence genetic activity. And the way the gene works depends on which nutrients are selected. It's kind of like if you're going to use baking soda instead of baking powder, or baking powder instead of baking soda, when the recipe calls for the one of them and not both of them. And so if you don't accommodate for, like in this case, let's just say the recipe calls for baking soda, you throw baking powder in because you don't have the soda, you actually have to accommodate that. You actually have to adjust the recipe. Otherwise, what happens by switching out that particular ingredient? You get a different result, right? This is all that's going on in the body. And so the oils actually help improve nutrient selection. Now, again, you don't have to be megadosing on anything. If you actually ate, made sure to include nutrient-rich foods and adaptogens in your system, and this is some things I like to talk about in the newsletter. And speaking of that, I'm going to also I have a master class coming up on the 12th of October. You just need to message me and let me know you want to be a part of it. It's actually going to be held in my Aromatherapy is a Lifestyle Facebook group. You don't have to participate in the group. But if you're going to want to do that, I just want this to be a close conversation. And what I know is that most of us are on Facebook, and it's easier to get into the Facebook Live than it is to try to download an app for other things like Zoom. So that's what I'm doing on the 12th, and that will include some of what I'm talking about here, because ultimately it comes down to how you use the oils and you pair it with foods and adaptogenic herbs. That's what makes, and then to top it all off, it's a change in our mindset. It's a recognition that, there's a potential for something to go wrong. Right now I'm fine. It may seem insignificant, and yet it's still hugely significant. Because the more that we can talk ourselves off the ledge and help to de-escalate what's going on inside of our system, the better equipped the body is to actually break down foods. It's really. And so when I was talking about earlier about using Mei Chang for things like respiratory issues that seem to be related to allergies and anxiety, that's really where we've seen really great results. And at the same time, it takes this other reminding of ourselves that we're okay, because otherwise we're going to maintain that level of chronic stress. And as much as we want to use oils, it's going to do next to nothing until we can get a handle on our thoughts. And that's the reason why I like Mei Chang, because it really does help to reduce that anxiety so that we can begin to think a little bit more clearly, and in turn begin to slow the production of histamine down. Because ultimately what's happening when we're not breaking our foods down is there's larger particles of glucose and protein floating throughout the system that the body cannot distinguish between that and a protein. A bacteria. So that said, the body begins to attack itself. It begins to release antibodies to try to, which increases histamine levels, okay? It begins to involve both the innate and the adaptive. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't allergies present, but what I am saying is that the more distressed the system becomes, the more aggravated it becomes, and the bigger the allergies get, or they seem to get. And so there are ways to actually combine oils, in this case Mei Chang, with other ones that would help to improve nitric oxide synthase production, reducing the amount of histamine, and also helping to improve digestion by soothing the autonomic nervous system. Now, this is things that I cover in the essential oils and epigenetic course. Like I said, there's a master class that I'll begin to cover some of this and that. But the full-on course will actually help you begin to design blends that align with what we're trying to do epigenetically as well as systemically. I hope that makes sense. So, but if we look at all the properties of Mei Chang, ultimately what it comes down to is it has this really significant impact on just really sedating the body. And the calmer the body can be, the better equipped it is to use the nutrients that it's taking in, reducing the amount of inflammation, reducing the amount of oxidative stress. So there's a whole, and that's the reason why Mei Chang is beautiful. But again, you don't want to use it with CNS depressants, antidepressants, or diabetic medication, simply because of the high citrol content. And again, if you look at the list of constituents, typically you'll see geraniol ending in al at the top, and that is another word for citrol. And we want to use a little bit of caution with that. But beyond that, if you're not taking any of those things, and you have symptoms along these lines, then I would recommend Mei Chang. Because ultimately what it's doing is it is in its own way soothing the autonomic nervous system. Like I said, in its own way. It can help reduce blood pressure. It can help stabilize the immune system. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound like it is like the queen of oils, but it's very, very profound because of the chemical makeup that's in it. And so, but I would really kind of focus it in on, I would be more specific along the lines, because anything can cause high blood pressure. Yes, it is related to the autonomic nervous system, but again, depending on what else is going on, will determine whether Mei Chang is your answer or maybe yet another oil. As far as, I'm trying to think. I would use a little bit of caution, but I wouldn't use this directly on the skin because it has a potential to be an irritant. So you always want to make sure you use it with a carrier oil. Let me think if there's anything else. I think I just want to, not to sound repetitive, but I just want to reiterate, no antidepressants, no diabetic meds, and no central nervous system CNS depressants. And those are the ones you'd be taking to sleep. Because technically, Mei Chang would actually help you sleep because of the high citrol content, which makes it really good for traveling. You don't want to use this you want to really, really dilute it. I wouldn't use it on anybody under the age of 2. And again, make sure you just you dilute it if you're going to put it on the skin. But it would help. It'd be a nice oil to have in the car if you're traveling. Because of the aroma, it's pleasant, and because of the sedating. But you want to use, I'm just really hung up right now on the fact that it's a strong sedative. And so you want to use it in things that are really in areas of your life where you're just really trying to de-escalate. But especially if you have symptoms of anxiety and histamine, which go hand in hand, because high histamine levels can lead to anxiety, which is what I was trying to say earlier. This isn't a really exceptional oil for that. So not necessarily respiratory, but if you do have a tendency to have high histamine levels linked to anxiety and you're not taking any of those medications, I won't repeat them, then you're safe to use this one. It would be very, very helpful, and it would help you to sleep. Okay, so on that note, you guys have a great day wherever you are, and until tomorrow when we talk about Google.